So yesterday I was looking at Vue.js and I was looking at all the trends, all the cool stuff that's coming to Vue. And what I kept on hearing and what people kept on telling me is look at GraphQL. You need to look at GraphQL, see how it integrates in with Vue. There's something called Apollo, how Vue Apollo works. So I got to thinking and I thought maybe that would be a good video to make today because I know a lot of people are interested in it. So today, this video is all about Vue Apollo, how to use the components in it, how to put it all together. So make sure you watch all the way and stay to the end and find out all about it. Hey, and if you don't know, my name is Eric. I'm a full stack software developer. I'm also the author of the Vue.js in Action book. And really the purpose of this channel is to make you a better professional developer so you can make those big bucks and get the job of your dreams. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the code. Okay, I went ahead and created a brand new Vue project here. So if you are interested in how to do that, you just make sure you install Vue. And then after you do that, you do Vue create and then the name of the project. So I went ahead and did that. And so here is the directories here. And you can see here I have a public. Here's my source. And just like the normal, I have this normal hello world, which is the normal hello world view. And so if we go ahead and start this, we'll go, just to make sure it works, we'll go npm run serve. And that will go ahead and start our development server. Okay, so if we go ahead and go to our localhost 8080. So here is our development server, and it seems to be working as we expected. Now what we want to do is we want to get to something like this. Now this guy looks kind of messy, I know, but what we're going to do is we're going to do a few things. We're going to be able to list some stuff from the GraphQL server, and then we're also going to use grab a mutation and see how that works. For example, doing an email and password and grabbing back an access token. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to use FakerQL. This is actually a website where you can just play around with GraphQL. You can create queries. You can create mutations and things like that. So like, for example, if I want to do a query, you can see here I have a bunch of examples. Let's say I want to do all users. And then from there, I wanted to grab, I don't know, the ID and the first name. And if I hit play here, it'll go ahead and grab all the information over here on the right hand side. We can also do mutations and everything like that. So this is the server we're going to use. Now we're going to use Vue Apollo is going to be the library we're going to use inside of our app to connect to the database and to do queries. So let's first set that up. So if you go to the installation, it tells you right here you just need to do Vue add Apollo. So we'll go ahead and do that. Let's stop the server. And then do Vue add Apollo. Okay, I ran the Vue add Apollo command, and now it's going to ask me a few questions here. So let me go ahead and move myself so you guys can see. It's asking me, do I want to add example code? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. So that way that'll help us. And GraphQL server, we're not going to use it since we're going to use the FakerQL one. And so it'll go ahead and install everything we need, and then I'll show you what it did there. All right, so I went ahead and installed everything. If you can look up here, this is all the files that it been updated or added. So it added some new stuff to my package.json, installed it. It added this Apollo example file. It added these GQL and fragment files, which I'll show you guys in a second. And then added a little bit of updates to our router, about, and home, and then this Vue Apollo file. So let's take a look. If we look in here, our file explorer on the left-hand side, I have now this GraphQL folder, and I have all these different GQL files. And you can see here, this is just the GraphQL queries. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete all these because I don't want to use them. Move them all to the recycling bin. And then it also adds this Apollo example file, which is actually pretty helpful, but we don't really need it either. So I'm going to delete it. Okay, so we deleted those. We can see here, this hasn't made this Apollo provider. It wouldn't have added this line into our main.js file. It also made an update to this file right here, but I don't think I see any changes right now. So it looks very similar to what it was. But here is the configuration file for Apollo. It has a bunch of stuff we probably don't need. So the first thing I want to do is the WS endpoint. We can go ahead and just delete this and make it null. We can go ahead and make this null. And you can see right up here, there's this process environment. So, or if we don't have the environmental variable set up, it's going to go ahead and use this. So we'll go ahead and delete this here. And we'll go ahead and paste in our URL, which I'm going to grab from my other screen here, of the one we're going to use. So let's go ahead and paste that in. Okay, so we got our FakerQL, GraphQL endpoint set up inside this file. We went ahead and set the WebSockets endpoint to null. I mean, we could go through here and delete a few other things, but just for now, we're going to leave it just the same. And by the way, I'll leave a link to this repo in the description so you guys can take a look at it if you want to jump in. So let's go ahead and just run it, see if I didn't break anything. I'm going to run serve it and see if it starts correctly. And if we look at it here, close that one. We'll run this, and yep, we're still running. We don't see any errors, so that's good. If we go to the console, yep, looks okay. So the next thing we need to do now is see if we can create some queries. So I'm going to create a couple of files here. And what we'll probably do is we want to grab all the to-dos. So essentially what we want to do is we want to do this command. This one where we did all, instead of all users, let's do all to-dos. And then out of there we can, I don't know, grab a title and ID. It kind of looks like this. And then this will bring all to-dos in. So let's see if we can create that first. And also let's see if we can add a limit to how many are returned. So we have this count right here. So we can do like count 5. And we can just return 5 of them. Or if we just want to do count 1, we can just return 1. So let's see how we set that up inside our Vue.js app using Apollo. So I'm going to create the query. I'm going to do a new file. And I'm going to call it alltodos.gql. And I'm going to now type it in here. So 1 second. So what I have right here is my all to-dos here. It's going to bring in, if you're not familiar with GraphQL queries or not, I would go to the GraphQL website that has some really great documentation on it. But essentially, we're doing this new query called all to-dos, where our variable's name is count. It's an integer. We're passing that into the query as count, and it's we were expecting it to return a title and ID. So that's as simple as it gets. Now, in this hello world, I'm just going to delete everything here. So we don't need any of this. And we'll just have what's opening and closing hello. And if once again we take a look at our view, yep, nothing there, that's fine. If I want, I can also go into the app.view, or is it in the main? Let's see here. I'm trying to remove the views here in the home. I'm going to remove this logo. So now we don't have the logo, we just have the home and about at the top. It's perfect. So in the hello world now, what we can do, so the first thing I want to show you is the way we add in the Apollo using the object inside the export default. So we'll leave this as default here. So what we do is we create an Apollo, and this Apollo object will actually hold where our queries are. So we have to actually import in the GraphQL query language here. So you use this GQL from, then GraphQL.tag. And now I can use this GQL right in our query here. So I just want to make sure I get this right. So we're going to call all to-dos, and we're going to do GQL, and then this little back tick here. And this is where we're going to have our query. So we'll do our query. Okay, inside this query, we're going to do all to-dos. And then we're going to pass in the title and ID. And then we're going to make sure that at the end of this that we end it with closing our GQL. And so what this will do is it'll make sure that our all to-dos is ran, and it'll run this query. Now, keep in mind, I actually kept this name the same as this name. If you don't, then you might get an error. I actually ran into that when I was trying this out. But having the same name, it works well. Okay, so let's see if we can just go ahead and make sure we can talk to our GraphQL. So we'll get back to the GQL file later. But I can do a div here, and I can do a v4, and I'll do to do in all to dos, and then we'll have to have a key, and that'll equal the todo.id that we had before. And just to make sure it works, we can do todo.title. And let's see if that works. So if we look here, you see here now we have all the titles of all the different to-dos that it created. So we know it works. I'll make this a little bigger. So it's definitely talking to our server. That's really cool. Let's say we wanted to do something a little bit different and actually in our all to-dos do a some sort of variable to limit the amount of things that come back. So I could just do count equals here and then put in just a literal here, like 5. All right, you can see here we have 5 here. So let's take a look to see how we do this using the GQL file. So I'm going to just take this template here. I'm going to comment it out just for now. And now I'm going to, for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste what a way we can do this using an Apollo query instead. So 1 second. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm doing an Apollo query. And of course, we're going to have closing Apollo query. Apollo query after this. And what this is doing is, and we'll have to have a closing bracket too. And what this is saying is that we're going to do a query. We're going to do this GQL. And we're going to do the GQL query, and we're going to do the all to-dos, and we're going to get the title and ID. So it's essentially the same thing as this, but instead of writing the query inside this Apollo object, now we're writing it inside the Apollo query here. So if we refresh it, one thing we actually have to do is when we use Apollo queries, I don't want to forget this, is we create a template, which once again I'm going to copy and paste. And inside this template, basically we have a slot in it. And the slot gives us 3 things. It gives us a result, which has a loading, an error, and a data state. So we can actually check for different states that it's in and then display different messages. The easiest way to do that is we can do like vif here, and then in vif we'll just include loading, data, or error. Just for what we're doing now and sake of time, I'm just going to show you the vif for data. And then at this point, we can do sort of the same thing we did here. So if I paste this here and I get rid of the comments, now we have option of all the information's actually in the data. So it would be data.allToDos. And then it would just wrap through the data to grab all the information. So if we save that and we look at it, so here it is again. Now we can see no errors. And here's all the information for everything that's in the GraphQL database. So that's another way to do it. Now the third way to do it is instead of embedding this query right into this Apollo. So essentially this Apollo query is a special component that you get in with Vue Apollo that you can then start writing queries right inside your templates. But let's say you didn't want to write the query like this. So what you could do, and just for the sake of argument, I'm going to comment that out. I'm going to create a new Apollo query, which I'm going to make an opening and closing tag for. And this time, I'm going to do the same query, but it's going to equal the GQL file. So once again, I'm just going to copy and paste this from another screen to save us a little bit of time, because you don't want to hear me type. So what this is saying is we're going to do a query, but this time I'm going to grab it from the all to dos GQL file, which remember is this one right here. And we're going to use that in there instead. Now this time, if you notice the all to dos GQL file, it actually has this count. So we can pass variables to it. So to do that, this is all part of the component. So we can, right here, we can add something called variables. and then the variables equal, and then you put these parentheses, and then count, which I can then pass in from our data object. So let me see here. Let me add a count here, I don't know, of 2. So now we're grabbing the all-to-dos GQL file, and we're passing the variables count over to it. So let's see if that worked. Cool. So you can see we only have 2 there. If we change this to 4 and then save it, now we have 4. And so you can see this could be dynamic, and you can just change it right inside. I can make an input and have it, well, let's see if we could do that. So if I do an input and I put a v model equals count, and I refresh this, you can see it says 4. If I put 2, it actually gave me an error because it got deleted. Let me try this again. 41. Oh, you know, one thing I have to do because it's giving me an error is because it's coming over as a string. So what you can do is, I believe it's v model dot number, and that'll make sure it's a number. Refresh this. Yeah, so now I can do 3, 4, 5, 6. So this could be dynamically grabbing stuff from our GraphQL database and displaying it, which is really cool. So I'll just comment that out. So that's the way you do Apollo queries. Essentially, is you just put the colon query. You can do the require here. You can add the variables. You can write it in the GQL file. You can write it inline inside here, or you can grab it from this Apollo right here, this Apollo object. So let's take a look at mutations. And the way you do mutations, and once again, I'm going to copy and paste from the screen here, is, so this is an Apollo mutation. So we have a mutation. We're actually going to create a new file called register.rql. So right in my GraphQL file, I'm going to do a new file. I'm going to call it register.gql. And you can obviously name this whatever you want. And then inside this, I'm going to have a new mutation. So this is what it looks like. So I have this register mutation. It takes an email and a password, and I'm passing it to this register, and it's returning a token. So I can actually run this on our playground. So if I do mutation here, and I call, I don't know, register, and then I'm going to have, well, just for the sake of it, I'll just do register like this. We know it has an email, which is, I know, blah.com, and then it also has a password, which in this case, let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see, is, you know, whatever you want it, and then it's going to return back the token. And here it is. So here's the token. This is essentially the query we're doing. We're creating a new mutation, which means it's creating something new on the server. It's an email and password, and I want it to return a token afterwards. So if we go back here, we now created our register GQL file. We'll save it. Now in the hello world, we're saying let's grab the register GQL file. We're going to use our variables email and password, and then on done. This is like a callback that will get something will happen. So we want to create a new on done method. So I'm going to create a new methods. I'm going to create on done, and just to make sure it works, I'll do alert worked. So that's in there. I'm getting an error because I don't have a closing tag here. So I'll have to create a closing Apollo mutation. Now, just like the other one where we did the template, we do the same thing with a template, but I'll copy and paste one over to you for you. And now I'll close this. So if we go into this next page here, or excuse me, this next screen. So what we're doing here, in between the opening closing Apollo mutation, I'm creating a new template. I now have vslot mutate. So if you look in the official documentations and you go to Apollo mutation, you can see you have mutate loading an error. So once again, you can have different v-ifs if you get an error or if you get a mutation. Mutate is actually like a command that actually triggers it. So what I did is I created a new form, and then I said on when the form was submitted, it would trigger this mutate, and this .prevent means it's going to prevent the default. And then I have this email, and then I have this password. I have vModel email, vModel password, and then the button at the bottom is to click to mutate, and it submits it. So let's see if that works. And just for the heck of it, we can also see if we get back the alert. So if we go back to here, so now we have this email and password. So I can put in my random email, password at gmail.com, password, and if I hit submit, I did get an error that property method password is not defined in the instance. Oh, so what I need to do is in my account here, I'm going to add in email and password. I'm going to save it. And now I'm going to clear the warnings and see if it works. Here's my other email, by the way. Cool. So I get my callback. It worked. I get my alert to show something. It says worked. So now I could probably even do something like this. I can create token, which just equals nothing. And then inside, instead of doing on the undone, actually this has a value that gets returned. So I could do this dot token equals val and see what happens there. If I do my email, oops, let me wait for this to load. There we go. And hit submit. It didn't do anything because it is adding it to the token, but we didn't display the token, which we can go ahead and do right here. Token. We'll try it again. Cool. So here's this big, actually return this data.register token. So I can even, if I wanted to, I can go back and do val.data.register.token. And then same thing here. Cool. And here's the big token that it came back with. So that's a lot to go over with. I went it pretty quickly, but essentially what I did is I created this mutation. It grabbed the information from the registered GQL file right here, where I'm passing an email and password in. A mutation is something that makes a change to the server, so this would actually send it to the server and make the update. I created this template, which has this vslot mutate, which is the way we trigger on a click to actually trigger it to do something, and it passes in the email and password into it because that is set up as the variables on this mutation. So that's essentially how it works. So I think that's a lot to go over. We could definitely deep dive into this a little bit more. There's more things you can do with this Apollo right here. I can actually add variables to it if I wanted to, just like I did up here with the components. But I think this is a good starting point. If you guys want some more information on Vue Apollo, please put a link in the message, put in a comment in the description below. I'm actually a little bit under the weather today, but I still had fun doing this. So please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. I appreciate it. Thanks.